Hi everyone, I'm Scott. I'm going to show you how to bulk cook your own inexpensive premium cat food at home. I'm going to show you how to do it as easily as possible and as quickly as possible. So let's just jump into it. There are a few essential pieces of equipment that you're going to need, such as a steamer, a few bowls, storage for the final food, and a meat thermometer to make sure your food is safe after cooking. I'll show you the essential pieces of equipment now, and then the additional pieces of equipment here. First, you're going to want to open up the chicken. Always remember to wash your hands before and after handling raw meat. Next, you're going to want to load the chicken into the steamer pot. I'm using the Purrform 5-tier steamer cooker set, and just a standard pair of tongs to load them in. This set comes with 4 steamers and 1 pan. I would only recommend using 2 steamers at a time per cook, as unfortunately the chicken does not cook thoroughly and sufficiently in the top 2 steamers if you're using the full set. Again, you always want to be aware of cross-contamination. That's why I placed these steamer pots onto the packaging of the chicken instead of onto the work surface. Next, you're going to want to fill up the steamer pot itself with water. This will take roughly 1.5 liters. What I like to do is fill that into the kettle first, so the water is already heated pretty much to the required temperature before you start cooking. Next, load the steamers onto the pot, add the lid, turn on the hob, and then set a timer for 40 minutes. If you're really time efficient, this marks the point you get everything ready for the next steps. After 40 minutes, the chicken should be thoroughly cooked through, but it's critical to check with a thermometer just to make sure. Get yourself a tray or something you can load the chicken from the steamer pots into. I like to wedge something just underneath so the fat from the chicken drips down and pools at the bottom of the tray. Remove the lid from the steamer pots. Take one piece of chicken and load it into the tray. This is what you're going to be measuring with the thermometer. As a rule of thumb, the more steamers you have in the cooker set, the higher up, the less cooked the chicken will be. So chicken from this steamer, if it's cooked thoroughly, then you can be sure the chicken underneath is also cooked thoroughly too. Set your thermometer to 74 degrees Celsius, insert it into the chicken, and if you've done it correctly, it should all be okay. Next, move all of the chicken from both steamers into your tray, again, making sure not to drip the fat all over your work surfaces. Especially take care when switching around the steamers themselves. What I like to do is just take the top steamer and slide it underneath the bottom steamer, just so when you move things around, you're not unnecessarily dripping fat everywhere again. Once you've done your little switcheroo, just continue as you were. Trust me when I say these tips save you on a lot of cleanup later if you're diligent about this. Designate yourself a bowl to move the skin and bone into. This is the waste product. And then just start deskinning the chicken. The reason I deskin the chicken before anything else is to, 1, remove some of the excess fat and let it drip down to the tray or the bowl, and 2, to cool the chicken down a little bit. After this, I'll be removing the meat from the bone using my fingers, just because it's a bit more granular, get a little bit more meat, and you remove any of the excess bone. And by this point, you've probably attracted your cat's attention with the delicious aroma. Cooking the chicken with the bone and the skin on also reduces cross-contamination risk, as you could do this before you cook the chicken. However, I find it's easier with cleanup, with potentially raw food touching more surfaces and utensils and whatnot. Another reason, a bit more subjective, is that I think it tastes a bit better once it's cooked. Obviously, I can't know what a cat thinks of the taste of the chicken, but the skin and the bone infuse a bit more taste in my opinion. At least it's tastier for me. Another reason for doing this after cooking is it makes the meat a bit more moist, and cats get almost all of the moisture they consume through the food they eat, which is why when you give them kibble or biscuits, they need to drink at fountains or water bowls much more often. Like, they'll still need to drink water after you feed them raw food or cooked food, but you'll notice it goes down considerably. Alright, now it's time to separate the meat from the bone. I'm going to show you a little technique. I like to do this by hand after it's all cooked, just because I want to make sure that there's no cooked bone included. And for those that don't know, You cannot feed a cat or any animal cooked bone because there's a chance it can damage their intestinal tract. Anyhow, with the thigh, pick it up and you want to identify what I call the top and bottom of the bone. So once you identify the top, which is the more exposed, pull off this little bulb. And then your goal is to move your hand downward and sort of separate all of it out in one go, and it'll sort of flower outwards. You want to use a fairly firm grip as you go down, and as you get further down, you want to use a loose grip. All of the problematic area is located towards what you can see is the right side of the thigh right now. So going from the top to the bottom, it gets quite hot with the first few. Slide your hand down, and then disconnect all of the meat, and then once you have that, it's all sort of floured out, and then you can move on to the next step. This area that I'm highlighting here tends to have the problematic cartilage and potentially some of the bone. So then once it's all floured out, you need to go around manually. You'll get a feel for this as you continue, and feel out for those hard pieces with your fingers. I found a nice chunk here which you can just bin into your disposable bowl, and then just continue your way around. You'll quickly get a feel for what you can immediately put into your to-use bowl and what you can immediately throw out. This part will be sped up a lot if you have a partner, spouse, sibling, etc. to help you out. While this part is the most critical, I find that my chances of finding a piece of bone that isn't directly connected to the main piece of bone pretty rare, maybe a 1 in 20 chance. Like for this cook I'm doing now, I didn't find any actually. I only found pieces of cartilage, and even if you miss some of it, I use a shredder in the next step just to make sure that the chicken meat is finely grounded down and any missed pieces of cartilage or whatnot is broken down to the point it doesn't matter. But again, this doesn't absolve you of the responsibility of finding these pieces in this step. So do your absolute best here. And again, it does get easier over time. Now you've finished isolating all of the meat, you're going to measure all of this separate from the bowl. If you have a second bowl like I do, you can just simply set the default of the scale to this weight of the bowl, put on your filled bowl, and then you have the final weight of how much meat you can actually serve to your cats. You're doing this because you need the calculation of how much Purrform Complete or whatever nutritional completer you're using to add into the meat once it's shredded. For this batch, it weighs 1.7 kilograms. Just keep this figure in mind as we'll come back to it later. Now it's time to break the meat down using your shredder or chopper. I'm using a Kenwood mini chopper. I would recommend investing in an electric one, otherwise your arms are going to get very tired. The reason I shred it is just to make it easier to serve, easier to measure, and also easier to mix in the completer. This is a very easy process. Just load it in from one bowl into the chopper, chop it, and then into the other bowl. Just being very careful not to get your fingers inside the machine when it's on. This one has a safety precaution, but again, better safe than sorry. Just a pro tip, with whatever hand you're collecting the meat and putting it into the chopper, I would advise using a fork, otherwise your hand gets very greasy and it becomes a bit hard to actually handle the chopper, as you can see here. And just keep going until you're finished. Now you'll want to grab your nutritional completer. Again, in this instance, I'm using Purrform Complete. Separate this out into a separate measuring dish or cup. The rule is use 1.5 scoops. 1 scoop is 1 gram, 1.5 grams per 100 grams of cooked meat. The calculation in my instance is 1,700 grams times 1.5, and then take that number and divide it by 100, and that gives you how many scoops of Purrform Complete you need to add. Then you need to mix in the completer into your meat. I'm using a couple of salad tossers to do this. I just find it makes it easier and keeps your hands clean. This is very simple. All you need to do is mix in the completer with the meat. I sprinkle it in and then just mix it in, and I repeat this process about 5 times. Should get you sufficient coverage throughout the food. And once you've mixed it in a few times and used all of the completer, that's essentially it. You've made the cooked food. So congratulations. And like you can see in the background, my cats are absolutely done with waiting for this amazing food. And what kind of monsters would we have to be to deprive them of that? If you're having a bit of trouble transitioning them to the new food, a little trick I like to do is just get a treat. In this case, I'm using freeze-dried cat treats. And don't worry, I didn't make these too. My cats aren't that spoiled. Although if you're highly skeptical of that after watching this video, I don't blame you. Next, you need to load the food into a storage container. I'm using Tupperware boxes from Tesco. These are the 680 milliliter ones. For 2 cats, I tend to find one of these will feed them for a day. This number might fluctuate around a bit depending on things like weather, how fussy they're being that day, or other factors, so you'll quickly get into the swing of it. I tend to keep 2 boxes in the fridge, one might be defrosting, and then the rest of them go into the freezer. I find one of these batch cooks produces 6 or 7 of these Tupperware boxes. You could very easily double up this process, so one cook produces enough food for 2 cats for 2 weeks, but this schedule works better for me. And here you go, here's the finished product. 6 Tupperware boxes of very nutritious cat food. Not a piece of kibble in sight. Remember, this is not the sort of food you can leave out all day, so you'll need to create a little meal schedule for your cats. And because cleaning up is part of the cooking process as well, I've got a few tips for you here too. Always use kitchen roll to remove as much excess grease and fat from your containers or storage mediums, etc. as possible. Your goal is to put as little down the drain as possible, or bring as little of it into a dishwasher. So, give everything a once over with a few paper towels. It's super useful if you have an empty 1.5 to 2 liter water bottle. You can pour all the excess fat and grease into the steamer pan, and then pour that into the water bottle with a funnel. Again, it's extremely important not to just pour this down the drain, or else you're going to screw up your pipes. It's important to take care of where everything's positioned while you're doing this. You don't want to accidentally spill something and it go everywhere over the kitchen counter. Trust me, I've been there, it's not fun. So, have the water bottle that you're going to pour the fat into in the tray that you're using for the chicken earlier. Just reduces on cleanup. Next, discard of all the chicken bones, skin, and paper towels. I like to double bag this just so it doesn't smell as much. And then once you finish with this, you can just take the closed water bottle and this bag and put it in the bin and you're done. And then you can just clean up the kitchen surfaces after. So yeah, this is how you make your own cat food at home quickly, cheaply, and easily. I hope this helps you in your own endeavors, and if you have any comments, stick them below. Thanks. Bye.